My name is Vivian Carter. I'm 29 years old and work as a project manager at a pharmaceutical company in Boston. For the past 7 years, I've worked tirelessly, saving every dollar to create my dream wedding, a celebration I thought would prove my life was finally stable and happy. But I was wrong. On the night of my glamorous engagement party in front of over 200 guests, my father, the man who once taught me how to walk, slapped me across the face. All because I refused to give my $150,000 wedding fund to bail out my financially reckless brother from debts that could get him killed. That was the night everything shattered. My name is Vivian Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I've spent my entire adult life doing everything right. I studied hard, graduated top of my class, and landed a job as a project manager at a pharmaceutical research company in Boston. While most of my colleagues were blowing their paychecks on designer bags or spontaneous trips to Europe, I was meal prepping lentil soup, living with roommates, and driving a 12-year-old Honda Civic that rattled every time I turned the ignition. Because I had a plan, a dream. I wanted a beautiful wedding one day, a celebration that wouldn't leave me or my future husband drowning in debt like my parents always were. So I saved. I tracked every dollar on Excel spreadsheets, said no to concerts, and worked overtime shifts whenever I could. And by 29, I had saved $150,000, enough for the wedding of my dreams, and a little extra to start our life together with security. But none of that mattered the night my father slapped me. It happened at my engagement party, a night that was supposed to mark the beginning of my forever. I remember arriving at the venue, a restored castle just outside Newport, with Jonathan holding my hand. He wore a navy suit that made his blue eyes stand out, and I wore a champagne satin gown I'd saved up for months to buy. As we stepped into the ballroom, glittering with chandeliers, string quartets playing Vivaldi, and over 200 guests smiling at us, I felt like everything I had worked for was worth it. I didn't know then that my world was about to collapse. My parents arrived late as always. My mother, Linda, immediately began eyeing the floral arrangements with tight-lipped disapproval, probably calculating how much they cost. My father, David, grabbed a glass of scotch before even greeting me. And then there was Nathan, my older brother, standing awkwardly near the door, his suit wrinkled, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. I tried to ignore it, tried to stay in the warmth of my friends congratulating me, of Jonathan whispering, "You look beautiful tonight, Viv." But I noticed the way my father kept glancing at me across the ballroom, the way Nathan wouldn't meet my gaze, and the way my mother kept wringing her hands together like she was bracing for something. It happened during dinner. My father walked up behind me, placed his heavy hand on my shoulder, and leaned down close enough that I smelled the alcohol on his breath. "Vivian," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk. Now." I remember the way my heart sank, the way Jonathan glanced at me, eyebrows furrowing with concern. I forced a smile at him. "I'll be right back," I whispered, excusing myself from our guests. My father led me down a corridor lined with oil paintings and gold-framed mirrors until we reached a small side room meant for wedding planners and staff. My mother and Nathan were already there, standing by the window overlooking the castle gardens, bathed in moonlight. I barely had time to open my mouth before my father spoke. "Your brother is in trouble," he said. "Serious trouble." I glanced at Nathan, who stared at the marble floor, shoulders hunched. My mother stepped forward, grabbing my hands. "Sweetheart, Nathan owes some very dangerous people a lot of money. If he doesn't pay them back soon, they said they'd hurt him." A cold wave washed over me. How much I asked, though? I already felt sick knowing where this was going. $150,000, my father said. "Exactly what you've saved." Silence pressed down on the room, so thick I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. My throat tightened. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "That's my wedding fund. I've worked for years for that. You know I won't give it away." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Vivian, please. He's your brother, and I'm your daughter," I snapped, anger flaring through my fear. Why is it always me who has to sacrifice? Why is it always Nathan who gets rescued? My father's eyes darkened the vein in his forehead, pulsing. Because family comes first, he growled. If you don't give us the money, your brother could die. I shook my head, tears brimming. I'm sorry, but no. That was when it happened. His hand flew up so fast I didn't even have time to flinch. The slap cracked across my cheek pane, exploding in a white, hot flash. I stumbled back against a table, my vision blurred by tears. You selfish little bitch, he hissed, his face twisted with rage. After everything we've done for you. I tasted blood where my teeth cut the inside of my cheek. My mother was sobbing. Nathan was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes, and in that moment, I realized the truth. Nothing I did would ever be enough. No amount of sacrifice would make me loved the way Nathan was. And maybe it was time I stopped trying. People always told me growing up that I was lucky. Your family is so put together, Vivian. Your parents are such professionals. Nathan is so handsome and charming. You're both so lucky to have each other. From the outside, we were the picture of a successful American family. We lived in a 2-story colonial house in a quiet Massachusetts suburb with white shutters and a manicured lawn. My father, David Carter, was a regional bank manager who wore crisp suits and carried the scent of expensive cologne wherever he went. My mother, Linda, was a freelance accountant, always dressed in muted colors, with her hair pulled into a tight bun, her makeup flawless. And then there was Nathan, my older brother, by 4 years tall and athletic, with an easy smile that made adults coo and girls swoon. We were the Carters, church every Sunday, BBQs with neighbors in the summer, Christmas photos sent out on glossy cards with matching red sweaters. To everyone else, we were perfect. But I knew better. I remember lying awake as a child listening to my parents fight about money long after they thought we were asleep. My father's deep voice rumbling with anger, my mother's sharp whispers of panic. I learned young that money was a monster hiding under our beds, always there ready to leap out and destroy everything. Nathan never seemed to hear the arguments. He slept soundly in his room filled with trophies, sports gear, and the newest gaming consoles. When he crashed his first car at 16, my parents bought him a new one within a week. When he maxed out his credit card freshman year of college, my father paid it off without a word of reprimand. When he dropped out the next semester, they told everyone he was finding his passion. Meanwhile, I learned to stay quiet, to be small. I brought home perfect grades, cleaned the kitchen without being asked, and spent my teenage weekends working at a local cafe to save for college. I never asked for designer jeans or a car or even a smartphone until I needed it for class projects. My mother would smile at me with that tired look in her eyes and say, "You're such a good girl, Vivian." So responsible. But underneath her praise was a silent expectation. Don't need anything. Don't cost anything. Don't become a burden. The older I got, the clearer the family dynamic became. Nathan was the golden child, the dreamer, the charmer, the one whose mistakes were simply stepping stones to something greater. I was the safety net, the planner, the saver, the quiet achiever who existed to prove the family wasn't failing entirely. When I graduated high school with a scholarship covering 80% of my tuition, my parents told everyone how proud they were. What they didn't say was that they gave me nothing for college. Every textbook, every meal plan, every lab fee, I covered it with my cafe wages and student loans. Because by then they were paying for Nathan's second failed business attempt, a smoothie shop that closed within 6 months. Sometimes I would sit alone in the campus library late at night, watching other girls FaceTime their moms about classes or boys or weekend trips. And I wondered what it felt like to be loved without condition, to be chosen first. But I never let myself linger on those thoughts because I had a plan. If I worked hard enough, saved diligently enough, achieved big enough, maybe someday they would see me, really see me. So I built my life around safety, around control, around never needing to ask them for anything. I thought if I created my dream wedding with my own money, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Nathan, with pride, with admiration, with love that wasn't laced with obligation or relief. But standing in that staff room, tasting blood in my mouth after my father's slap, I realized all along I had been building my life on a fantasy. Our family wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. And no matter how hard I tried, I would never be the daughter they wanted, because what they wanted was never me. It was just someone who stayed silent while they set everything on fire. Money was always a problem in our house, or at least that's what I thought growing up. It wasn't that my parents didn't earn enough. My father's managerial salary was solid, and my mother took on enough accounting clients to keep us comfortable. But somehow, by the end of each month, there was nothing left. They called it living the American dream. I called it living in quiet terror. I remember being 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table doing my math homework, while my parents whispered furiously in the living room. David, we're already maxed out on the credit cards. The minimum payments alone are choking us. We'll refinance the house again, he'd snap back, voice low and sharp. It'll buy us time. That was the pattern. Max out, refinance, repeat. By the time I was 15, they'd refinanced the mortgage twice. By the time I was 17, they had opened store credit cards in my mother's name at Macy's, Nordstrom, Lowe's, and all of them were maxed out too. Nathan's college tuition paid for entirely, with Parent Plus loans that ballooned to almost 6 figures before he even flunked out. But none of it compared to what I learned the summer before college. I was 17, working double shifts at the cafe to save for my dorm deposit. One evening, I got home early to find my parents and Nathan in the kitchen, papers spread across the table. They didn't notice me standing in the hallway. She doesn't need to know, my father was saying. She's getting a scholarship anyway. But it's her name on the account, my mother said, quietly wringing her hands. If they find out, they won't, Nathan cut in, his tone dismissive. It's just for a few months. Once my app takes off, I'll pay it all back with interest. I felt ice spread through my chest as I stepped into the room. What's going on? They all turned to me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father forced a smile. Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. But I wasn't stupid. I walked over and looked down at the paperwork. My name was there, bold and clear, next to words I didn't yet fully understand. Co-signer, line of credit, $50,000 limit. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling. My father sighed. It's just a safety net for Nathan's business loan. You'll be in college soon. Building credit will help you later. Don't worry, we'll cover the payments. That was the first time I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. They had used my name to co-sign a $50,000 business line of credit without telling me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on my bedroom ceiling, wondering what would happen if Nathan failed. The answer came 3 months later when his app crashed and burned before it even launched. I came home from class to find my mother crying in the kitchen, clutching a letter. Your payment is late, Vivian, she whispered, as if reading it aloud would break her. They're reporting it to collections. My payment, my credit, my future. That was the day I understood something fundamental about my family. I wasn't their daughter. I was their safety net, their collateral, their backup plan. But here's the twist I didn't learn until years later, a twist that still makes my stomach clench when I think about it. Nathan's business loan. It wasn't for his app. It wasn't for any company at all. When the financial investigator contacted me last year after my father's arrest, he told me the truth. Nathan had taken out that $50,000 line of credit under my name to pay off his gambling debts to an illegal poker ring in Rhode Island. All those years, he let me believe he'd simply failed at another startup, that it was just bad luck. But the truth was darker. He had lied to me, to our parents, to everyone, gambling away my financial future before I even turned 18. And my parents, they knew. They'd known the whole time. But instead of confronting him or protecting me, they chose to cover it up. Because that was easier. That was simpler. That meant keeping the golden boy golden and the responsible daughter silent. Looking back now, I see it so clearly. My life wasn't built on love and family loyalty. It was built on secrets, lies, and a never-ending game of financial Russian roulette. And sooner or later, someone was going to pull the trigger. When I turned 18, I made myself a promise I would never depend on anyone again. I moved out 2 weeks after graduation. My acceptance letter to Boston University felt like a golden ticket out of the chaos, but it was only a partial scholarship. The rest I knew was on me. My parents didn't even offer to help with the deposit for my dorm room. They just waved me off with forced smiles, Nathan too busy flirting with his new girlfriend to even say goodbye properly. That summer before college was the hardest of my life. I worked 3 jobs to cover what my scholarship didn't. Morning shifts at the cafe from 6 a.m. to noon, stocking shelves at the grocery store until 5 p.m., data entry at a medical billing office from 6 p.m. to midnight. I'd come home to my tiny sublet room collapse on the mattress on the floor and stare at the ceiling, wondering how long I could keep this up without breaking. My friends were posting Instagram stories from Greece, Ibiza, Coachella. I deleted the app. Their world felt like another planet. Mine was fluorescent lights, aching feet, and the constant gnawing fear that I was one emergency away from losing everything. But even then, I refused to give up, because I had learned the hard way no one was coming to save me. In my first year of college, I became obsessed with spreadsheets. I tracked every cent I spent, from bus fare to instant ramen. I only ate out twice that year, both times for networking events I couldn't afford to miss. I borrowed textbooks from the library or bought used copies so highlighted they looked like rainbow vomit. When my laptop battery died during finals, I borrowed an old ThinkPad from a lab mate who was about to throw it away. Sometimes late at night, I would watch my roommate Zoe doing her skincare routine, humming softly while FaceTiming her mom about weekend plans. I'd sit on my bed pretending to scroll through my phone while jealousy burned hot and shameful in my chest. I wondered what it felt like to call your parents just to say hi instead of bracing yourself for requests or guilt trips. But I never cried. I refused to. Instead, I worked harder. By sophomore year, I landed a paid research internship at a pharmaceutical lab. I would wake up at 5 a.m. to prep samples before class, then run across campus for lectures, then back to the lab until evening. I kept my GPA above 3.9 every semester to maintain my merit scholarship. The lab director once told me, "Vivian, you're the most disciplined student I've ever met." I smiled and thanked him, but inside a dark voice whispered, "It's not discipline, it's survival." Because underneath every achievement was fear of falling behind, fear of becoming like my parents, drowning in debt, blaming the world while refusing to change, fear of becoming like Nathan, charming and empty, floating from one failure to the next, always expecting someone else to cushion the landing. By the time I graduated, I had less than $15,000 in student loans, an impossible feat for most American students. I got a job offer as a project coordinator at a major pharmaceutical company before I even finished finals week. My starting salary felt like winning the lottery. But unlike most new grads, I didn't buy a new wardrobe or upgrade my phone. I rented a room in a shared apartment with peeling paint and broken heating. I kept driving my rattling Honda. I packed rice and canned tuna for lunch every day because I had a plan. Security first, wedding second. I wanted a wedding one day, a beautiful one, yes, with flowers and music, and a dress that made me feel like the heroine of my own story. But more than that, I wanted the freedom to walk into my marriage unburdened. No secret debts, no unpaid bills lurking like ghosts, no fear that my husband would wake up one day to discover I was a financial black hole like my parents. So I saved. For 7 years, I put aside 30% of every paycheck. My coworkers called me frugal. Some laughed when I said I still used a flip phone for 3 years to avoid data charges, but I didn't care. Because every time I checked my wedding fund spreadsheet and watched it climb $10,000, $35,000, $80,000, I felt powerful. By the time I met Jonathan, I had $150,000 saved, enough for my dream wedding, a honeymoon to Italy, and a small nest egg for emergencies. Enough to finally feel like I could breathe. I thought I had built an unbreakable life. But what I didn't know then was that the stronger I became, the more desperate my family would become to tear it down. Because in their eyes, my strength wasn't a triumph. It was a resource they hadn't tapped yet. I met Jonathan at a pharmaceutical tech conference in Cambridge. I almost didn't go. The ticket cost $250, and even though my company reimbursed it later, just paying up front felt like watching my savings bleed out. But my supervisor insisted, saying it would be good networking. I was standing alone by the free coffee bar, scrolling through my notes on the next presentation, when someone said behind me, "Is it just me, or do these muffins look suspiciously stale?" I turned around and saw a man in a navy sweater, faded jeans, and scuffed brown boots. His hair was dark and slightly messy, as if he had run his hands through it too many times that morning. But it was his eyes that caught me, a kind of gentle curiosity, as if he actually cared about the answer to his muffin question. I surprised myself by laughing. "They do," I said, "but free is free." He grinned, spoken like someone who knows the value of $1. That was our first conversation. Simple, ordinary. But it felt easy, like there were no hidden tests to pass. His name was Jonathan Hale. He was a software engineer working on AI solutions for medical research labs. Over the next 2 days, we kept bumping into each other at different talks and workshops. He asked insightful questions. He listened when others spoke. And unlike most people at the conference, he didn't spend every break bragging about his career. On the last evening, we shared an Uber back toward Boston. He asked if I wanted to grab dinner. Part of me hesitated. Dinner out wasn't in my budget that week, but something about his calm, steady presence made me say yes. We ended up at a tiny ramen shop tucked between a laundromat and a vape store. He ordered the cheapest broth on the menu. I got miso with extra bean sprouts. For 2 hours, we sat shoulder to shoulder at the counter, slurping noodles and talking about everything from the ethics of AI in healthcare to our favorite childhood cartoons. When he asked about my family, I gave him the polished version. "They're good people. We're just different." He didn't push. He just nodded, like he understood something unspoken. After dinner, he insisted on paying. I protested out of habit, but he said softly, "Vivian, I know how hard you work. Let me treat you this time." It wasn't pity in his voice, it was respect. That night, as I lay in my bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling, I thought about how different he was from anyone I'd ever dated. The men before him always felt threatened by my discipline. They joked about my spreadsheets, called me stingy when I wouldn't splurge on $20 cocktails, rolled their eyes when I chose to walk instead of paying for a lift. But Jonathan never made me feel like I had to apologize for wanting stability. In fact, he admired it. When I told him months later about my wedding fund, expecting at least a hint of discomfort, he just smiled and said, "You're amazing." I wish I'd learned to plan like that sooner. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone saw my carefulness not as weakness or paranoia, but as strength. And I didn't know it then, but falling in love with Jonathan would become the one anchor I'd cling to when my entire world came crashing down. If there was one thing constant about Nathan, it was that he was always chasing the next big thing. Crypto, drop shipping, real estate wholesaling. He jumped from scheme to scheme with the same reckless enthusiasm, convinced each time that this was it. This would make him rich. 6 months before my engagement party, Nathan called a family meeting at my parents' house. Jonathan and I were invited, though I almost didn't go. I knew exactly what it would be about another exciting opportunity that somehow required other people's money. When we arrived, Nathan was pacing the living room phone glued to his ear, barking orders to someone about distribution channels and accelerated returns. His hair was longer, pulled back in a low bun, and he wore ripped jeans with a hoodie branded with the logo of his newest venture, Eclipse Energy. "Viv John, you're here?" he said, pulling the phone from his ear without even hanging up. "Wait till you hear this." He launched into a pitch about his startup selling customizable energy drinks, organic adaptogens, nootropics, gluten-free, keto-friendly, every trendy buzzword crammed into a single can. He said they'd secured a small local factory, had influencer marketing lined up, and projected 7 figures in revenue within the first year. I watched Jonathan nod politely as Nathan spoke, but all I saw were the numbers scrolling across my mind like red warning lights: production costs, minimum order quantities, FDA approvals, distribution contracts, none of which Nathan mentioned. Again. My father was beaming with pride, as if Nathan had just won a national award. My mother looked worried but said nothing. They had already invested $50,000 from their retirement account to help him launch. I knew they couldn't afford that. But what I didn't know yet was how much worse it would get. 2 months before the engagement party, Eclipse Energy collapsed. Nathan had funneled money into social media ads that brought in clicks but no conversions. His co-founder pulled out, accusing him of mismanagement. The factory threatened legal action for unpaid invoices. When the dust settled, Nathan was left with $300,000 in debt. That was when the phone calls started. My mother began calling me every few days, always opening with small talk, asking about my job, my wedding planning, Jonathan's work trips, before slipping in comments about Nathan. "He's under so much stress, Viv," she'd say, her voice tight with fear. "The business world is so unfair to innovators," or "he's not sleeping honey. He's so worried about what's going to happen if he can't pay them back." I recognized the pattern. It was the same script they'd used when they co-signed his first credit card at 16, when he crashed his car at 17, when he dropped out of college at 20. But this time, something in her voice terrified me. A kind of trembling I'd never heard before. "Mom," I asked one night, pacing my tiny apartment kitchen, "who does Nathan owe this money to?" She went silent. I heard her breathing shallow and rapid. "Investors," she whispered finally. "Some private investors." "What kind of investors?" "People who expect to be paid back. People who don't like waiting." That was when the nausea hit, because in my gut I knew. Nathan hadn't just borrowed from banks or angel investors. He'd borrowed from men who didn't send polite reminder emails when payments were late. Men who sent threats, or worse. And I knew without a doubt what was coming next. They would ask me, because I was always the one who fixed things, the one who had money saved, the responsible one. That night, Jonathan found me sitting in the dark, staring at my wedding fund spreadsheet on my laptop, tears streaming silently down my face. He knelt beside me and said gently, "Whatever it is, Viv, you don't have to solve it alone." I looked at him, his eyes full of worry and love, and I knew then my family was about to ask me to choose between them and my future with him. And I had no idea what I was going to do. Despite everything brewing beneath the surface, I poured my entire soul into planning our engagement party. For once in my life, I wanted to create something beautiful that was entirely mine, a memory unsullied by debt secrets or obligations. We chose Chateau Willowbrook, a restored stone estate just outside Newport, with manicured gardens, marble fountains, and ancient oaks strung with fairy lights. From the moment I stepped onto its gravel driveway for the venue tour, I knew this is where I will begin the rest of my life. I spent weeks crafting every detail, handwriting calligraphy name cards in navy ink to match the evening sky, choosing peonies, blue hydrangeas, and ivory roses for the centerpieces, designing a string quartet set list of Vivaldi and Debussy to play softly as guests arrived. Jonathan let me take the lead, only smiling and shaking his head with amusement when he saw me creating Excel tables comparing table linen textures. "I love how much you care about this," he told me one night as I spread samples across our living room floor. "It's going to be perfect." And it was. The evening of the party, golden light spilled across the gardens as the sun set. The fountains bubbled gently, catching the last rays of orange. The fairy lights twinkled overhead, mirrored in champagne flutes set out on linen-draped tables. I wore a satin cream cocktail dress I'd saved up for months to buy. It hugged my body, perfectly simple and elegant, making me feel like every woman I'd ever admired in bridal magazines. Jonathan wore a tailored navy suit with a silver tie. When he saw me at the top of the stairs, he whispered, "God, Viv, you look like the rest of my life." Guests began to arrive, weaving through the gardens with laughter and hugs. My college roommates, my colleagues from the pharmaceutical lab, Jonathan's parents who had flown in from Portland. His mother, Elaine, pulled me into a tight embrace. "You're already like a daughter to me," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Her words wrapped around my chest like warmth I didn't know I craved. Jonathan's father shook my hand firmly before pulling me into a quick hug. "You make him so happy," he said simply, and that felt like the highest compliment I'd ever received. For a moment, standing there among the flowers and music and love, I believed I could hold this happiness forever. But then my family arrived. My mother's eyes darted around, calculating the cost of everything in sight. My father gave me a stiff nod, then turned to Jonathan's father, immediately launching into a loud discussion about market trends. Nathan trailed behind them, wearing a wrinkled button-down that was clearly too small for his broad shoulders, hair tied back in his usual messy bun. His eyes avoided mine, flickering with discomfort as he muttered, "Nice party, Viv. Must have cost a fortune." I forced a smile and offered to show him to the bar, trying to push away the sinking feeling in my chest. This was my engagement party, my moment. I wouldn't let anything ruin it. As the evening deepened, the string lights glowed brighter against the indigo sky. Jonathan and I mingled among guests, accepting congratulations and sipping champagne. Every time he brushed his hand against my back or whispered a joke in my ear, warmth bloomed in my chest. This is what safety feels like, I thought. This is what love should be. But beneath the music and laughter, I kept noticing them, my parents and Nathan huddled in quiet, tense conversations in different corners of the garden. My mother's eyes grew increasingly red-rimmed. My father checked his watch, repeatedly finishing one scotch after another. Nathan paced in small circles, glancing at me whenever he thought I wasn't looking. Jonathan noticed too. As he refilled my glass with sparkling water, he leaned close and murmured, "Is everything okay with your family tonight?" "They seem upset." I gave him a small, practiced smile. "I don't know," I whispered back, "but whatever it is, it can wait until tomorrow." I clinked my glass against his. The lights twinkled above us. The music soared in the night air. For those fleeting moments, I let myself believe this was the start of my fairy tale. But deep down, somewhere beneath my ribcage, a familiar dread coiled tighter and tighter, whispering a truth I didn't want to hear. My family never lets me have anything without a price. The evening had settled into that perfect glow between sunset and darkness. Guests were sipping champagne under the fairy lights, laughter blending with the soft strains of the string quartet. I was mid-conversation with Jonathan's college roommate when I felt a firm hand clamp down on my elbow. I turned and saw my father, his face flushed, from Scotch eyes hard. "Vivian," he said in a tight voice, "we need to talk. Now." My stomach clenched. I glanced at Jonathan across the garden. He caught my eyebrows knitting in concern. I gave him a small shake of my head. "Not here. Not now." My father steered me away from the party down a stone path lined with lanterns until we reached a small alcove near the fountain. My mother and Nathan were already there, standing beneath the marble archway, bathed in flickering candlelight. My mother's eyes were swollen and red. Nathan stood hunched over, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, staring at the ground. I crossed my arms tightly over my chest, bracing myself. "What is this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My father took a deep breath as if summoning patience. "Your brother is in serious trouble," he said. I stayed silent. I already knew where this was going. "He owes people a lot of money," my father continued. "Dangerous people." "How much?" I asked flatly. 300,000, he said, then quickly added, "But your mother and I have already given him everything we can. We pulled from our retirement accounts, maxed out our lines of credit. We're tapped out, Vivian. And you think I can fix this?" My voice came out colder than I intended. My mother flinched. "Vivian, please," she whispered, stepping forward to grab my hand. "They've threatened to hurt him if he doesn't pay. You have that wedding fund, no." The word cut through her plea like a blade. "Absolutely not." "Just listen." My father snapped, his voice rising. "You've saved $150,000 for a wedding. You and Jonathan can have a smaller ceremony. Postpone it a year. You're good at saving. You'll build it back." The rage that surged in my chest burned hotter than I ever thought possible. "Do you hear yourself right now?" I said, my voice trembling. "I've spent 7 years saving for this. 7 years of skip trips, secondhand clothes, and microwaved lentil soup while you bailed Nathan out again and again. And now you want to take this from me too." "Family comes first," my father barked. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Family comes first," I repeated, "except when it was my tuition, except when it was my rent or my textbooks or my car repairs. Family came first when it was Nathan's dreams. When it was my needs, I was told to figure it out myself." Nathan finally looked up, his face pale and sickly under the candlelight. "It's not fair to say that, Viv. I've just had bad luck." My chest tightened with a pain so familiar it felt like home. "Bad luck, Nathan. You've had nothing but chances, and you've thrown them away every single time. We're not asking you to give it to him forever." My mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Just until he gets back on his feet." I pulled my hand from hers, feeling like my heart was splintering in my chest. "No," I said firmly. "This money is for my future, for the life I've worked for. I won't sacrifice it for another one of Nathan's failures." My father stepped forward so close I could smell the scotch on his breath. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "These people he owes, they could come after all of us. Is your fancy wedding worth your brother's life, worth your mother's peace of mind?" The manipulation was so blatant it almost made me laugh. "If it's that serious, go to the police," I snapped. "We can't," Nathan said quickly, panic flaring in his eyes. "There are contracts, things I signed." Of course there were. There always were. I took a shaky breath, feeling my resolve harden like cement. "My answer is no. I'm not giving you my wedding fund." I turned to leave, needing to escape before my knees gave out, but my father blocked my path. His face twisted with rage, cheeks flushed deep crimson. "You selfish little bitch," he hissed, "after everything we've done for you." My vision blurred with tears as I whispered back, "You've never done anything for me except teach me how to survive without you." His hand shot out, gripping my wrist so tight I winced. "You're going to write that check tonight, or this engagement is off." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I yanked my arm free and looked him dead in the eye. "You don't get to decide that. This is my life, my money, my choice." As I walked back toward the glowing garden, I felt their eyes boring into my back, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of the war. I barely made it 5 steps before my father's voice thundered behind me. "Don't you walk away from me, Vivian." I stopped, but didn't turn around. His quiet rage vibrated through my bones. Slowly I faced him, seeing my mother's tear-streaked face and Nathan's pale, stricken expression over his shoulder. "Vivian, please," my mother began, but my father cut her off with a sharp gesture. He stepped toward me, eyes bloodshot with fury and scotch. For a moment his face twisted into something almost unrecognizable. There was desperation there, but also hatred. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He didn't just resent me for saying no. He hated that I had the power to say it. "You selfish little girl," he spat. "After everything we've done for you." "Done for me," I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. "You never paid for my tuition. You never helped with my rent. You spent your entire life throwing money into Nathan's failures while telling me to fend for myself. Don't stand there and pretend you've sacrificed anything for me." My mother sobbed harder. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, staring at the marble floor. "Family comes first," my father growled. "Family," I repeated, my voice breaking. "Or Nathan, because it's never been both." His face darkened. In the flickering candlelight, he almost didn't look like my father anymore. His hand shot out so fast I barely saw it coming. For a fraction of a second, there was silence. Then the crack of his palm against my cheek rang out across the alcove. Pain exploded through my face, hot and electric, radiating down my neck. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my cheek as tears blurred my vision. I tasted blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. The world seemed to stop. The music from the garden faded into a distant echo. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding so hard it felt like it might shatter my ribs. My father stood over me, chest heaving, eyes wild. My mother gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. Nathan whispered, "Dad, what the hell?" I straightened, slowly refusing to cower. My cheek burned with every throb of my pulse, but I forced myself to look him dead in the eyes. "You just proved everything I've ever believed about you," I said, quietly, my voice trembling but steady. "That your love was always conditional. That it was never love at all." "Don't be dramatic," he barked, his voice slurring. "You deserve that. Maybe now you'll finally do the right thing." I shook my head as tears slipped down my cheeks. "No, I'll never give you my money. Not now, not ever." Behind him, I saw Jonathan sprinting toward us, his face pale with fury. He shoved past my father and wrapped his arms around me protectively. "What happened?" he demanded, glaring at my father. When he saw the red mark blooming across my cheek, his eyes darkened with a rage I'd never seen before. "Did you hit her?" "This is family business," my father snapped. "Stay out of it." "Family business." Jonathan's voice shook. "You just hit your daughter. That's not family business. That's assault." He turned to me, cupping my face gently, his thumbs brushing away my tears. "We're leaving. Right now." My father lunged forward, grabbing my wrist again. "You're not going anywhere until you write that check." Jonathan stepped between us so fast that my father stumbled back. His voice was calm but deadly as he said, "If you touch her again, I swear to God, don't threaten me, boy," my father sneered. With shaking fingers, I pulled my phone from my clutch. My vision blurred, but I managed to dial 911. As the dispatcher answered, I spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'd like to report an assault." My father just slapped me across the face in front of witnesses. I'm at Chateau Willowbrook. My father's eyes widened, shock cutting through his drunken rage. You're calling the police on your own father? I met his gaze steadily, tears still streaming down my cheeks. Yes, because you're not my father anymore. As I pressed in, the night around me seemed to shift. The fairy light still twinkled above the music, still floated faintly from the garden. Guests still laughed in distant corners, oblivious to the war that had just exploded under those ancient oaks. But I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Because in that moment, as the pain throbbed in my cheek and Jonathan held me like I was something precious worth protecting, I realized I had finally chosen myself. My hands were still trembling when I ended the call with 911. The dispatcher's calm voice echoed in my mind, grounding me amidst the chaos. Jonathan kept his arm protectively around my shoulders. His hand was warm, steady, and it gave me the strength I didn't know I still had. My father stared at me in stunned silence, his chest heaving, his face red with rage and confusion. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably now, her makeup streaking down her cheeks like ink on wet paper. Nathan just stood there staring at me with wide, horrified eyes. "Viv," he whispered, his voice cracking. "What did you do?" I turned to him slowly, tasting blood on my tongue, my cheeks still throbbing. "I did what none of you have ever done," I said, my voice low but unwavering. I stood up to him. Jonathan tightened his grip around me. "We're leaving," he said firmly. But my father wasn't done yet. He lunged forward, grabbing my other wrist, squeezing it so hard I gasped in pain. "You're not going anywhere," he snarled. "Do you hear me? You're going to write that check and fix this family you're so desperate to destroy." "Let go of me," I whispered through clenched teeth. "Not until you do the right thing," he roared, shaking my arm. And something inside me snapped. I wrenched my wrist free with a strength I didn't know I possessed. My voice rose sharp and cold, like shattered glass. "The right thing. You think the right thing is giving away the money I worked 7 years for, so Nathan can pay off criminals he never should have borrowed from. You think the right thing is being slapped across the face because I refuse to be your ATM one more time." He froze, breathing heavily, the fury in his eyes flickering with something else, shame maybe, or fear. But I didn't care anymore. I stepped forward until we were nearly nose to nose. My cheek burned, but I ignored the pain. All I felt was rage and a strange cold clarity. "You will never touch me again," I said softly, my voice trembling with restrained fury. "You will never threaten me again. And you will never see a single cent of my money." I turned to my mother. She looked small and broken, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For a moment, my heart twisted with grief. But then I remembered the countless nights I lay awake as a child listening to them fight about money. Remembered the days I went without lunch so I could save for textbooks while she handed Nathan cash for his next doomed venture. "Mom," I said quietly, "I'm sorry he's dragged you down with him, but I won't drown to save you." She shook her head, tears falling faster. "Vivian, please no," I said, my voice final. Jonathan slipped his hand into mine, squeezing gently. "Let's go." But as we turned to leave, my father's voice rang out slurred and shaking with rage. "You ungrateful little bitch," he spat. "After everything we've done for you. After all we've sacrificed." I spun around, my eyes blazing with tears and fury. "What exactly have you sacrificed for me, Dad? You didn't pay for my education. You didn't help with my first apartment. You didn't even ask about my career unless you needed to brag about it to your friends. The only thing you've ever sacrificed for me was your respect." He opened his mouth to retort, but no words came out. The silence between us felt like a chasm, deep, dark, and final. In the distance, I heard sirens wailing closer, their cries echoing through the stone corridors of the chateau. Guests began to gather at the garden's edge, their shocked whispers blending with the music still playing softly from the string quartet. Jonathan pulled me close, wrapping both arms around me, shielding me from the stares. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the scent of his cologne, letting it calm the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "It's over," he whispered into my hair. "He can't hurt you anymore." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because standing up to my father meant more than just losing his approval. It meant losing the illusion of family I'd clung to my entire life. And as painful as that was, for the first time, I felt free. Because I was no longer their safety net. I was no longer their silent, obedient daughter. I was my own person. And no one, not even him, could take that away from me. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cruisers lit up the garden like a surreal nightmare. Guests huddled together, whispering in shocked tones as officers moved quickly through the stone archways. The string quartet had stopped playing. The air buzzed with tension. An officer approached me, a tall woman with her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. "Ma'am, are you the one who called 911? I nodded, still clutching Jonathan's hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. "My father assaulted me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremors in my body. "He slapped me across the face." She studied me carefully, her eyes flicking to my reddened cheek. "Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated for only a moment. Then I thought of his words, his slap, the years of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. "Yes," I whispered, "I do." She nodded. "We'll take your statement. Do you have any witnesses?" Before I could answer, Heather, my maid of honor, stepped forward, holding up her phone. I recorded everything she said, her voice shaking with anger. The slap, the threats, all of it. The officer took the phone and glanced through the footage. "This is clear evidence," she said, turning to her partner. "Cuff him." Two officers approached my father, who stood swaying slightly, his face pale and stunned. As they pulled his arms behind his back and clicked the handcuffs into place, he exploded. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, struggling against their grip. "She's my daughter. I have every right to discipline her if she disrespects me." The officer remained calm. "Sir, she is 29 years old. Striking another adult is assault." My mother burst into tears, clutching his arm. "Please don't take him. He didn't mean it. He's just stressed because of everything." But the officers ignored her. As they began to lead him away, he twisted his head to glare at me, his eyes wild with betrayal. "You're destroying this family," he spat. "All for your precious money." I felt Jonathan's hand on my back steadying me as I straightened my shoulders. "This isn't about money," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is about respect, something you never gave me." For a moment, everything was silent except for my father's ragged breathing. Then, as if unable to hold it back any longer, he shouted, "You don't understand. You think this is just Nathan's debt? These men, they know where we live. They know everything. If we don't pay them back, it's not just Nathan who's in danger. It's all of us." The words hung heavy in the night air. The female officer paused. "What men, sir? Who does your son owe money to?" My father clamped his mouth shut, but Nathan, shaking and pale, spoke up. "It's some guys Dad borrowed from, for his gambling." My head snapped toward Nathan so fast my neck cracked. "His what?" Nathan swallowed hard, tears pooling in his eyes. "Dad's been gambling for years, Viv. It wasn't just my debts. He borrowed from them to cover his losses." My mother let out a strangled sob, covering her mouth with both hands. "David, tell me he's lying." But my father said nothing. His silence was answer enough. I felt like the world was tilting beneath me. Memories flooded back, the late-night phone calls, the unaccounted for cash, the mysterious business trips that never resulted in new contracts. All this time, I thought Nathan was the only black hole in our family's finances. But the truth was so much worse. My father didn't just enable Nathan's failures, he funded them with dirty money he never had in the first place. As the officers led him away, my mother sank to the ground sobbing. Nathan stood frozen, staring at nothing. Jonathan turned to me, his eyes filled with sadness and quiet fury. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I shook my head, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "No," I whispered, "but I will be." Because in that moment, as everything I thought I knew about my family collapsed, I understood something painfully clear. They were never the perfect family. They were never even good. They were just desperate people drowning together, and I was their final lifeline. But not anymore. After everything collapsed, I felt like a hollow shell moving through the world. The bruise on my cheek faded within a week, but the bruise inside me stayed much longer. Jonathan suggested therapy, and for once I didn't argue. I booked my first session with Dr. Rachel Simmons, a trauma specialist. Sitting on her leather couch, I told her everything: the loans in my name, the stolen wedding fund, the slap, the years of silent sacrifice. When I finished, she looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "You've lived your entire life in survival mode, Vivian. It's time to start living in healing mode." That sentence cracked something open in me. For the first time, I allowed myself to grieve, not just what my father did, but the childhood I never truly had. I cried for the little girl who packed her own lunch while her brother got takeout, for the teenager who walked to work in the snow so her parents wouldn't pay for gas, for the woman who believed love was something she had to earn by giving until she bled. 3 weeks after my father's arrest, Nathan called. I almost declined the call, but something in me wanted closure. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard. "Viv," he began shakily, I needed to say I'm sorry." I stayed silent, my heart thudding painfully. "I know I've ruined everything," he continued. "I used to think you were uptight and selfish for never helping me, but now I see you were the only one trying to keep us afloat. I didn't understand back then. I do now." Tears blurred my vision. I swallowed hard. "Thank you for saying that." He let out a choked laugh that broke my heart a little. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying to fix my life. I got a bartending job. I moved out of Mom's place. It's not much, but it's honest." For the first time, I heard sincerity in his voice, untainted by excuses. It didn't erase the damage, but it was a start. "I hope you keep going," I whispered, "for yourself." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, feeling the cool autumn air brush my skin. The city lights twinkled below like stars scattered across the earth. Jonathan came outside, draping his jacket over my shoulders. He didn't say anything. He just sat beside me, holding my hand. In that silence, I realized I had finally stepped out of the role my family trapped me in. I wasn't their fixer, their ATM, their sacrifice. I was just Vivian. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. 6 months after the night that changed everything, I stood under a maple tree at Riverside Botanic Garden, holding Jonathan's hands. The October air was crisp and smelled faintly of fallen leaves and damp earth. I wore a simple ivory sheath dress, nothing like the elaborate ball gown I once envisioned, but it felt right, light, honest mine. Only 30 people gathered around us, Jonathan's family, my closest friends, my therapist, Dr. Simmons, and a few colleagues who had seen me fight my way through darkness back to the light. My mother sat quietly in the second row. We were still rebuilding slowly with careful boundaries, but today wasn't about her. It was about me, about us. As Jonathan said his vows, his voice shook with emotion. "Vivian, you taught me what real strength is. Not the kind that pushes through pain, but the kind that says, I refuse to keep living this way. I promise to always stand beside you, never in front of you or behind you as we build the life we choose." Tears streamed down my cheeks, but this time they were warm and sweet. Because for the first time I felt chosen for who I was not, for what I could provide or fix. When it was my turn, I whispered back, I spent my whole life trying to earn love by giving everything I had. You showed me that real love doesn't come with a price tag. It comes with freedom. Thank you for choosing me as I am. After we exchanged rings, the garden erupted in cheers. Jonathan pulled me into his arms and kissed me, and in that moment, the shadows of my past finally loosened their grip. Later that evening, as guests laughed and clinked glasses under the glowing lanterns, I stepped away to watch them. The fairy lights sparkled like fallen stars, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I belonged here. In this life, I built not from sacrifice, but from intention and choice. Jonathan found me standing alone and wrapped his arms around my waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. I smiled, leaning back against him, feeling his warmth seep into my bones. "I'm thinking for so long, I believe family meant obligation. Now I know family means respect, safety, and love without conditions. And I'm thinking that for the first time in my life, I'm finally free. Because here is what I've learned. Family isn't always the people who raised you. Boundaries aren't betrayal, they're protection. And sometimes saying no to others is the most powerful yes you will ever say to yourself. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt trapped by family expectations, guilt, or endless demands, I hope my story shows you that it's okay to choose yourself. That your worth isn't measured by how much you give until there's nothing left. Because you, just as you are already enough. And you deserve a life that feels like freedom. It's been a year since that night in the garden, and sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, half expecting to hear my father's angry voice echoing down the hallway. But then I feel Jonathan's arm draped over me, hear his soft breathing beside me, and remember I'm safe, that life is over. Our days are quiet, simple, and filled with small joys I never thought I could afford to slow down for. Morning coffee on our tiny balcony overlooking the city. Evening walks with our adopted rescue dog, a gentle golden retriever we named Willow after the garden where we married. Lazy Sundays spent reading together, our legs tangled on the couch as sunlight streams through our windows. At work, I was promoted to senior project manager last quarter. My boss called me the most organized person he's ever met, and for the first time, I accepted praise without shrinking from it. Because I've realized discipline isn't something to hide in fear of judgment. It's my strength, my anchor. I still go to therapy every week. Dr. Simmons helps me untangle the guilt that flares up whenever my mother texts about her loneliness, or Nathan calls asking for advice. I'm learning that I can care about them without sacrificing myself again. That I can love them from a distance without letting them pull me back into their chaos. Jonathan and I are saving for a small house just outside Boston. Nothing grand, just a place with a little garden for Willow to run in and a sunlit corner where I can set up a reading nook. Some nights we curl up on the couch and plan future trips, Japan in the spring, Portugal in the fall, and I catch myself smiling so wide it makes my cheeks hurt. Because for the first time, my dreams feel reachable. Not because I'm endlessly sacrificing to make them happen, but because I'm building them with someone who dreams alongside me. I used to think life was about proving my worth to people who never saw it. Now I know life is about creating a world where I no longer need to prove anything to anyone, just living it freely, authentically, and finally with peace.